I wish I could tell you this started with something dramatic. Yelling across fences, cops showing up, neighbors peeking through blinds. But no, it started quietly, almost politely, with a real estate listing. Just another one dropped into the feed. You know the type, wide-angle shots, soft music in the background, everything staged to feel bigger, cleaner, more expensive than it actually is. This was in a neighborhood called West Hollow Creek. Nothing fancy, just middle-class homes where people mostly mind their business. And yeah, at first glance, the duplex next door looked good. Too good, honestly. Fresh paint, warm lighting, perfectly placed furniture, even a drone shot sweeping in like it was some luxury estate instead of a slightly upgraded rental property. But then I saw it. One photo, kind of buried in the middle of the listing, easy to miss if you're just scrolling fast. I didn't scroll. I froze. Because what I was looking at wasn't just part of the scene. It was my driveway. Not similar. Not shared. Not kind of overlapping. My actual driveway. Same crack running down the side from that winter freeze 3 years ago. Same slight discoloration where I spilled oil fixing my truck. Same exact alignment hugging the east edge of my property. And right over it, clean and confident like it belonged there, was the caption, "Private off-street parking for both units." I actually laughed, like a quick, confused, almost impressed kind of laugh, because the audacity? It caught me off guard. But then I kept reading. Exclusive dual vehicle access via extended paved drive. And that word, exclusive, that's when the laugh stopped. Because now it wasn't just sloppy marketing, it was a claim. A confident one. And I remember leaning back in my chair thinking, wait, are they actually trying to sell my property as part of theirs? Because here's the thing about that driveway. It's not some vague shared space people argue about years later. It was poured when the land was subdivided decades ago. It's clearly marked in the original plat. And if you know where to look, you can still find the steel survey pins embedded right at the corners, flush with the concrete like quiet little reminders that this line was decided a long time ago. I maintain that driveway. I repair it. I pay taxes on every inch of it. I insure it. It's mine in every way that matters. There's no easement. No shared access. No handshake agreement passed down from previous owners who didn't want to deal with it. Nothing. So seeing it casually repackaged like some bonus feature, yeah, that didn't sit right. Now the guy next door, let's call him Travis, had just renovated his duplex. And I'll give him credit, he knew what he was doing. Everything about that listing screamed maximize value. Clean design, neutral tones, staged like a catalog. But Travis wasn't just renovating. He was positioning. And somewhere in that process, he made a choice. Because you don't accidentally label something exclusive access. That's intentional. That's calculated. That's someone looking at a situation and thinking, maybe I can get away with this. So I reached out to the listing agent, kept it simple, calm, gave them an easy way to fix it without making it a whole thing. I said, hey, I think there's been a mistake. That driveway in your listing actually belongs to my property. There's no legal access tied to the duplex. You might want to update that. No attitude. No accusations. Just facts. And her response, yeah, that's when I knew this wasn't going to be quick. She said, well, Travis has been using that driveway for years, and he believes it's part of his property. I remember just staring at my phone like, did you really just say that? Because that sentence right there, that's not confusion. That's justification. That's someone building a narrative. I replied, using something doesn't make it yours. And I kept it short on purpose, because I wanted to see if they'd correct course. They didn't. So I escalated slightly, still polite, still reasonable. I pulled the official survey from county records, highlighted the exact boundary line running along the concrete seam, included photos of the survey pins still in place. It was clear, undeniable, not opinion, fact. And then nothing. No response. No correction. The listing stayed up exactly the same, still advertising my driveway like it came bundled with the duplex. And that's when it stopped being theoretical. Because within a few days, I started noticing more activity. Cars slowing down. People walking the property line. Looking. Pointing. Imagining. And then one afternoon, I turned onto my street and saw it. 2 cars, parked halfway up my driveway like they belonged there. And standing next to them, smiling, confident, mid-pitch, was the agent. I rolled down my window just enough to hear her say it. And as you can see, you've got plenty of space here, easy access, No need to worry about street parking. I almost laughed again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was disbelief, because I was literally watching someone sell access to my property while I was sitting right there. And I didn't jump out, didn't yell, didn't cause a scene. I just sat there for a second, engine running, hands on the wheel, watching it play out like I was invisible. And something shifted in that moment. Not anger, not frustration, something colder, more focused. Because up until then, I thought I was dealing with a misunderstanding. But this was intentional. This was someone testing how far they could push, and assuming I wouldn't push back hard enough to stop them. And right there, in that quiet moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to go back and forth. If they wanted to turn this into a business move, then I was going to respond the same way. Calm, precise, and a whole lot more permanent. All right, let's pause right here for a second, because this is exactly where most people either handle things smart or completely lose control of the situation without even realizing it. According to standard procedure, property ownership isn't based on who uses something the most. It's based on what's legally recorded: deeds, plats, surveys, easements. Those are the only things that actually matter when things get serious. You can park somewhere for 10 years straight. That still doesn't make it yours if there's no legal right attached to it. From a legal perspective, what Travis and his agent were doing was risky in a very specific way, because real estate listings aren't just marketing, they're representations. The moment you advertise a feature like private parking or exclusive access, you're making a claim that buyers rely on. And if that claim turns out to be false, it can open the door to misrepresentation, contract disputes, even lawsuits after closing. And here's the psychological layer that makes this even more interesting. This is a psychological trap called perceived ownership through repetition. If someone uses something long enough without being challenged, their brain slowly rewrites the rules, turning access into entitlement and entitlement into belief. And once that belief locks in, they don't feel like they're taking something. They feel like they're defending what's already theirs. The lesson here is, if you don't actively define your boundaries, someone else will define them for you, and they'll do it in a way that benefits them, not you. So after that moment, sitting in my car, watching someone casually sell access to my property like I wasn't even part of the equation, something just locked in mentally. Not anger, not even frustration anymore. It was clarity. The kind where everything slows down and you realize, this isn't emotional, this is structural. And once you see it that way, you stop reacting and you start executing. Because here's the truth nobody says out loud. Once money enters the picture, people don't misunderstand anymore, they justify. And Travis? He had already built part of his asking price around something that didn't belong to him. So no, this wasn't going to resolve itself with another polite message. First move, I brought in a real estate attorney. Not a generalist, not someone who dabbles. I mean someone who lives in this world, boundary disputes, easements, title conflicts, the kind of person who doesn't guess, they verify. And right behind that, I hired a licensed surveyor to physically re-establish the line. Now this guy shows up early, like 7:30 in the morning, coffee in one hand, equipment in the other, barely says anything at first. He walks the length of the driveway, slow, methodical, checking measurements, cross-referencing points. Then he stops near the edge, crouches down, brushes dirt away from one of the old steel pins, and just nods. Not dramatic, not impressed, just certain. He looks up at me and goes, "Yeah, this line is exact. No overlap, no ambiguity." And I swear, that's the moment I knew this was over. They just didn't know it yet. Within a few hours, he had bright stakes driven into the ground along the full boundary line, then sprayed high-visibility paint tracing the exact edge where my property ended and Travis's began. It wasn't aggressive, but it was impossible to ignore. Like drawing a line in permanent ink across a story someone was trying to rewrite in pencil. And then came the legal side. Now here's the thing about attorneys. The good ones don't come in loud. They don't threaten. They don't posture. They make things inevitable. My attorney drafted a cease and desist letter, and the tone? Calm, almost neutral. But every sentence carried weight. It demanded immediate correction of the listing, removal of all photos and descriptions implying ownership or access to my driveway. And it clearly outlined potential consequences if ignored: misrepresentation claims, liability exposure, buyer deception, encroachment issues. No emotion, just cause and effect. And it wasn't just sent to Travis. It went to the listing agent too. Because if you're going to correct behavior, you don't just talk to the person benefiting, you talk to the people enabling it. Now for a brief second, I thought that would be enough. Because usually, once liability gets mentioned, people start making smarter decisions real quick. But instead, silence. No reply. No correction. Just that quiet pause that tells you they're still weighing their options, still hoping maybe this won't escalate further. And that right there, that hesitation, that's where they lost control. Because while they were thinking, we were moving. My attorney filed a formal notice with the county recorder, and this is where things shift from private dispute to public record. This wasn't just me saying, that's my driveway anymore. This was an official, recorded clarification stating there is no easement, no shared access, no legal claim whatsoever benefiting the duplex. And once something like that is recorded, it follows the property. Every buyer, every lender, every title search, it's there, permanent. And at the same time, my attorney reached out to the managing broker, not the agent, the person above them, the one responsible for the entire operation. And the message was simple, direct, and honestly kind of brutal in how clean it was. Here is the survey. Here is the listing. Here is the contradiction. Here is your liability. That's it. No threats. No emotion. Just exposure. And that's when everything snapped into place. Because agents might take risks, sellers might gamble, but brokerages? They calculate. And this suddenly looked like a losing equation. Within 48 hours, everything changed. The listing was scrubbed. Not edited, scrubbed. Every single photo that included my driveway. Gone. Replaced. Cropped out. Like it had never existed in the first place. The description? Rewritten. No more exclusive access. No more private parking. Just a quiet, almost apologetic line about street parking availability. And if you know real estate, you know how much value just disappeared in that one edit. And then came the email. Professional. Controlled. Carefully worded like someone had reviewed it 3 times before hitting send. We acknowledge the boundary clarification. We apologize for the oversight. The listing has been updated accordingly. Oversight. That word again. I almost appreciated it, not because it was accurate, but because it was safe. It allowed them to exit without admitting intent. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The correction was the response. But I wasn't done. Because here's what I've learned. Correcting behavior once doesn't prevent it from happening again. Clarity has to be reinforced. So I made the boundary permanent. The temporary stakes? Gone. Replaced with solid markers set in concrete. Clean. Visible. Deliberate. Not aggressive, just undeniable. Then I installed signage right at the entrance. Private property. No unauthorized vehicles. Towing enforced. No legal jargon. No room for interpretation. Just simple, direct language. And yeah, I added motion-triggered cameras too. Not because I wanted to escalate, but because enforcement without visibility is just a suggestion people ignore. And almost immediately, everything shifted. No more cars creeping onto the driveway during showings. No more agents casually gesturing toward it like it was part of the package. Buyers stayed on the street. Conversations changed. The narrative corrected itself in real time. Because once something is documented, marked, and enforceable, it stops being flexible. As for Travis, yeah, the duplex sold. Eventually. But not the way he planned. Without that bonus feature carrying part of the value, things slowed down. Less interest. More hesitation. More questions. And time on market? It stretched. And in real estate, time kills momentum. When it finally sold, it sold lower. Not dramatically, but enough. Enough to matter. Because parking isn't just convenience, it's leverage. And once that leverage disappeared, so did part of the price. But the part that stuck with me most wasn't the number. It was the paper trail. Because now, attached permanently to that property's history, is a clean, undeniable record of the boundary. Something every future buyer will see. Not a rumor. Not a disagreement. A fact. And all of this, because someone thought they could quietly blur a line that was never actually blurry in the first place. So here's what really stayed with me after everything settled down. It wasn't the listing getting fixed. It wasn't the legal letters. It wasn't even the drop in sale price. It was how close this whole situation came to becoming normal. And that's the part people underestimate. Problems like this don't usually start big, they grow quietly. One small assumption at a time. One unchallenged behavior at a time. Maybe the previous owner didn't say anything when Travis first used the driveway. Maybe it happened once, then twice. Then it just became how things work around here. And over time, that pattern starts to feel real. It starts to feel justified. And eventually, it gets written into a listing like it was always true. According to standard procedure, none of that matters. The law doesn't care about habits. It cares about documentation. But people care about patterns. And when those patterns go unchallenged long enough, they turn into beliefs. From a legal perspective, this is exactly how small boundary issues turn into full-scale disputes, because once money gets attached to that belief, like in a property sale, it stops being casual. It becomes risk. It becomes liability. It becomes something people will defend, even when they're wrong. And here's the psychological side that really matters. This is a psychological trap that works both ways. On one side, someone convinces themselves they have a right to something because they've used it long enough. On the other side, the actual owner stays quiet to avoid tension, to keep things friendly, to not make it a big deal. And in that silence, the story shifts. Slowly, quietly, until one day, you're not correcting a misunderstanding anymore. You're confronting a fully formed belief. An undoing belief. That's always harder than setting a boundary early. The lesson here is clarity is not conflict. A lot of people confuse those two. They think if they draw a firm line, they're being aggressive, difficult, or confrontational. But clarity isn't about fighting. It's about preventing the need to fight later. Because once something is clearly defined, legally, physically, visibly, it becomes very difficult for someone else to reinterpret it in their favor. And if you're on the other side of this, if you're the buyer in a situation like this, slow down. Seriously. Because listings are designed to sell a story, not verify reality. Don't assume access means ownership. Don't assume what you see is what you're getting. Ask questions. Request surveys. Check recorded easements. Because what looks like a convenient feature might actually belong to someone who just hasn't pushed back yet. And once you sign those papers, that problem becomes yours, not the seller's. And here's the part that really matters. This whole situation, it was avoidable. Not on my side. I stepped in when I needed to, but on theirs. All it would have taken was checking the survey, verifying the boundary, asking one extra question before building part of a sale around something they didn't own. But instead, they leaned on assumption. And when that assumption got challenged, everything built on top of it started to fall apart. Value dropped. Leverage disappeared. Time on market stretched. Reputation took a hit. All from one decision to treat something close enough as good enough. So no, this wasn't about winning. It wasn't about proving a point or getting even. It was about making sure reality stayed anchored to something objective, something recorded, something that couldn't be casually rewritten just because it was convenient. And I'll be honest, situations like this happen way more often than people think. Lines get blurry. People stay quiet. Assumptions grow. Until one day, someone decides to enforce what was always theirs to begin with. So now I'm curious, what would you have done? Would you have stepped in early, drawn the line before it escalated, or would you have let it slide to keep the peace? Because a lot of people believe keeping the peace is the safe option, until they realize that peace without boundaries isn't peace at all. It's just borrowed time.